All right, we're live. We're waiting to go live here on Facebook, YouTube. All right, we are live there as well. Give everybody a minute or so. Hop on, go grab a water. All righty. All righty. Here we are. We are live. All right. Well, I understand this is not the best time to go live, impromptu, but I got a busy packed schedule today, and something came up that I wanted to share with everybody. So, uh, just as a refresher, my name is Jerry Kuykendall, Coach Jerry. I'm the owner founder of Biohacking Truth, where we made it our mission to help people find their ultimate state of fulfillment and health in life, high energy, whatever's getting in your way, whether that be pain in the body, excess weight, lack of energy, lack of fulfillment. We help you source that and overcome that. So today I want to talk about motivation. And motivation is obviously a key component in any transformation and any sustained, healthy, high level wellness lifestyle. And quite honestly, it's one of the first things that disappears, people think. And unfortunately, the lack of knowing how to source your motivation keeps people from attaining their goals a lot of times. And this has come up a lot for me in the last couple of weeks. So I figured I'd make note to say hi to these guys. 406 Williams, D. Alec. Alex the man, guys. If you don't follow him, follow him. And so anyway, motivation. It is widely talked about, but hardly ever broken down. And I think it's misunderstood by a lot of people. And I say that through my observation and experience, my own personal journey with motivation. So anecdotally, I am the type of person that's very yang, very outgoing, very type A, very extroverted. And so I run on a lot of dopamine and, and adrenaline. But one of the problems that I had in the past was this stop and start process with health and weight loss. I've probably gained and lost 50 pounds or more 8-10 times in my life. I've been able to sustain it for the better part of last 8 or 10 years. But, that didn't really happen until I accidentally stumbled across the true source of motivation and how to know what kind of motivation you're operating under. And so with that in mind, I'll just kind of kick it off. So when you hear me talk about these different types of motivation, there's top-down motivation, there's bottom-up motivation. And I didn't take time to check my notes, so I might have this backwards, but I believe this is correct. So like you have the top-down motivation, which is your hot motivation. This is what I call extrinsic motivation. uh, oh no, dude, I'm not an animal. I'm faking it. No, man, I make light stuff look heavy. That's my trick. I just take really lightweight and I make it look hard and heavy, so it makes it look like I'm trying really hard. It's one of my secrets in the gym. Anyway, so I like to refer to this as extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. So extrinsic is something that comes from the outside in, and intrinsic is something that comes from the inside out. And so if you think of extrinsic motivation, that's the type that burns really hot. That's like, if you've ever had a time where you've just kind of been sitting there and you got hit with a thought about something and you're like, I've got to act on this right now. That is that white hot top down extrinsic motivation. And then we've got the intrinsic motivation that comes from within. This is something that that might be tied into like soul purpose, might be tied into like Holy Spirit, anything like that, where it's almost divine, where it's almost guiding you somewhere and you really can't explain it. For me, a personal experience that I can really bring to light that was deep intrinsic motivation. Probably the first time I can remember experiencing deep intrinsic motivation was when I decided to transfer out of the grocery business into the health business. And some of you have heard this story, but I'll tell it again. But basically, I signed up at the Czech Institute, full-time grocery store manager, don't even really have time for anything. And here I am going to enroll in this class. And the reason why I made that choice was because it was the first time that I found somebody or an organization that was speaking something about health, wellness, rehabilitation, recovery that actually made sense. And so for me, that made it really clear in the moment how important health really is to me. and how much I had this deep subconscious fear of not having it or attaining it or keeping it through my life. And so that's what I know now. I didn't know it at the time. But anyway, this intrinsic motivation, it is heavy, it is dense, it is, think of like a fire, like a big log on a fire that you can't even tell it's on fire, but it's smoldering, it's smoking. You come back the next morning, maybe you're camping, you wake up and it's still going. That is like intrinsic motivation. Whereas extrinsic motivation is that white hot, like you're throwing small pieces of pine wood on your campfire and it's burning hot and fast. So sources of extrinsic motivation. I guess before I go into that, I'll touch up a little bit on why it's important to know the difference. Because just like building a campfire, just like building your plate, right, for optimal metabolic capability, optimal assimilation within the body, optimal bioavailability on your plate, just like building a campfire. Same thing, you've got to build your plate properly, you've got to build your campfire properly. Otherwise, it's going to burn too slow or too fast, too hot, not hot enough. And so if we can combine that white hot motivation, that top down, that extrinsic motivation, if we can tie that in with our intrinsic motivation, just like building a campfire. So when we build a campfire, we start off with small pieces of kindling, maybe some brush, bigger hunks of wood. Then we start working up to more log type sizes of wood. And so that would be like laying down the extrinsic motivation, get the fire hot. And then as the fire is going, we find our internal drivers and we start sourcing our intrinsic motivation. This is the deep-seated motivation as opposed to like the superficial layer of motivation. And obviously, the more motivated we are, the more compliant we are to whatever program we are, the more fun we have when we're doing whatever we need to do. We have fun shopping. We have fun building the menu. We have fun going to the gym. We have fun recording our results, right? But when that motivation runs out and we're still going through the action steps, which is important, that's called discipline. But when the motivation is gone and we're just going through the disciplined action, then it's not generally as rewarding because we've lost touch with the process. We might still get similar results, but the reward isn't there. So sources of these motivations, extrinsic motivation. Obviously, we're all very familiar with motivational speakers, with motivational music, with podcasts. We've got so many awesome podcasts out there. Huberman Lab comes to mind. Living 4D with Paul Chek. If you guys haven't checked that out, give it a shot. Give it a listen. If you're kind of averse to really, really deep thinking and seeing things in a big picture and maybe considering some possibilities you haven't considered before, I invite you to test your ability to take that in with an open mind. I challenge you to check that out. I think you will be pleasantly surprised. So things like, podcasts that really speak to us. I'm sure you guys have turned on a podcast before and it seems like, oh my God, they created this episode just for me. This is exactly what I need to hear today. Right. So when you get that feeling, you get this big wave of extrinsic motivation. So what does that lead to? That leads to inspired action. Right. Most of us we'll pick a date on a calendar to start something. Sometimes that gives us extrinsic motivation. Right. But sometimes that day comes and we don't have the extrinsic motivation. So we push it off and we start a week later, or we find some excuse why we can't start today. In other words, we might have burned our motivational fire before the actual date on the calendar showed up. Results in inspired action, usually fast results, short to midterm compliance. But as soon as that motivation runs out, then we find excuses to back off, or maybe we don't know how to recover properly. Maybe we don't know how to really manage all areas of our energy systems and all aspects of our health and wellness to maintain balance in the body, even though we're adding excess stress through exercise. So there's motivation that can be waned because of lack of energy as well. So that's kind of extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation, that's where it's a little more, I should say a lot more involved. And there's a lot more self-work we've got to do to source this. Because if we are motivated externally and we are not squared away internally, in other words, we don't know exactly why we're going at what we're going at. If we're not fully in touch with that, then this white hot motivation is just going to be burning a fire that is going to fuel something that really isn't in line with what we value. Okay. So that's the typical professional that climbs the ladder, gets really successful, and then realizes one day, holy shit, my life is miserable, and it's because I've hung my ladder on the wrong wall. Again, personally, that was my story. Worked my ass off to be a store manager at 28 years old. And then by about 31, 32, I was like, what have I done? What have I done? I got myself in a shitty spot here. So intrinsic motivation, like there's multiple ways you can source this, guys. There is no one formula. There is no one system. This is something that's really close to the system that I use with my clients and with myself. So first thing you got to do is you got to know your personality. And again, this is within my system. I'm not saying anything you're doing is wrong, but within my system, first thing we got to do is we got to know your personality. We got to figure out exactly what your core motives are, what your biggest fears are, where you place your shame, where you choose to accept guilt, these types of things, because that will explain what motivates you and what demotivates you, right? What puts wind in your sails and what just shreds your sails to bits and pieces. So first step, figure out what makes you tick. And then we figure out, what do you value? Like, what do you value in your life? And if we don't know that, first place we start is we take a look at your actions, because your actions tell you what you value. Now that might be a superficial value, that might be an ego value, that might be an escapism value, it might be a feel better for the moment value. But even that information will give us something. It will let us know, hey, you're resisting something and you're choosing this strategy instead. So knowing what it is that you value, and then after a bit of work, we can get down to sourcing some values that actually are in line with your dream and your purpose, which leads to the next one. You got to know what your purpose is. This is, superficially referred to as the why in the mindset game right now. But if we think about it, big picture, like, what is my purpose for myself? What is my purpose for how I want to show up to the tribe? And how do I want me and my tribe to show up and impact the world? Because if you have a good vision on how you want to impact yourself, and you have a good vision on how you want to impact the world, but your tribe doesn't match that, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, right? You're a summation of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And if you're spending your time with people that have low visions of life, have low expectations of themselves, have a low level of belief in themselves, identify as losers, like, and I just use that word for effect. Nobody's a loser, nobody. But if they identify that way, then guess what? It's going to seep into you, even at a small level. So knowing your personality, knowing what you value, knowing why you're doing what you're doing. And if you don't have a spiritual relationship or a spiritual philosophy, look into that. I don't encourage atheism, but if that's your thing and that's what you've settled on, then take a look at how you can take that belief system and tie it into something bigger than yourself. And keep an open mind about the possibility that you may be wrong. I certainly do. So we've got personality, we've got values, we've got our purpose tied into a spiritual pursuit, tied into something bigger than ourselves. Dare I say God. And from there, we need to inventory our needs. What is it that I really need? And am I living up to that? And if not, why? What's getting in the way? What am I honoring instead? Ties right back into that values thing. So once we get that all healthy, you know your personality, you know what you value, you know why you're doing what you're doing, your needs are being met, or at least you know why they're not being met, then it's time to close that story gap. We close that story gap. And I know this sounds like a long-winded explanation, but as boring as this might be, or as eye roll as this information might seem, right? That shows like how out of touch we might be with it. And if we're that out of touch with it, this is why our motivation is waning, okay? Because we don't really know why we're doing what we're doing. So story gap is like, this is where I picture myself here, right? This is a trajectory line. Picture myself here, and this is where I'm at now. The difference between those is what's called the story gap. It's the life you want to live versus the life you're currently living. It's hard to close that gap if we don't know ourselves, if we don't know what makes us tick, if we don't know what our core motivations are, what our biggest fears are, where we place our guilt and where we accept shame, or where we place our shame, where we accept our guilt. If we don't know what it is we truly value, and where we're currently wasting time, energy, investments on things that aren't in line with us. So if we don't know all that stuff, and we don't know why we're doing what we're doing, we're going to have this big story gap. And if we're not in touch with all those important elements that close the story gap for us, then we're just going to be throwing things at the problem. We'll just be throwing, oh shit, new exercise program. Oh shit, new diet. Oh shit, new Deepak Chopra book, whatever. And that's what leads to fulfillment. So it's really hard to get in touch with all these and not end up being fulfilled, right? It's just, once you get in touch with what's missing, it's really hard not to go get it. It's really hard not to go get it. It's just within us. It's innate. So a couple tips to source that external, extrinsic, and internal, intrinsic motivation. And everybody's formula is different. Some people need a lot of white hot motivation, a little bit of intrinsic. Some people need a lot of intrinsic, a little bit of white hot. Again, that's all based on your personality. So tips for extrinsic white hot motivation: top down, immersion, whatever it is. Like if you want to lose weight, start immersing yourself in healthy diet, healthy menu, healthy meal plan types of content, whether that be books, whether that be podcasts, whether it be a combination, whatever the case may be, but immerse yourself in the topic. So if you start your day off with a walk, maybe start your day off listening to an audiobook, or start your day off listening to a podcast that immerses yourself in the subject that you want to be more proficient in or see some success in that arena. Manage your energy well. Manage your energy well. So to take on all this top down white hot motivation, right, it's going to kick up a lot of dopamine. It's going to kick up a lot of adrenaline, right? And all those elements in your body require resources to keep going. So make sure that you're resting properly. Make sure that you're getting good sleep, and make sure that you're staying committed to being in touch with these sources of motivation in your body. So it's immersion and commitment. Those are two big major components. And the last one I will talk about when I'm done with the intrinsic. So intrinsic tips: take the time to get to know yourself. Take the time to get to know who you truly are, not who people say you are, not who you think you are, but really get down to it. Get down to your personality, get down to your values, get down to your purpose, inventory your needs, close that story gap, and determine how fulfilled you truly are in what you're doing. But because we can't take inspired, effective, long-term action if we don't honestly know where we're at currently compared to where we want to be. In other words, if we don't know how big our story gap is, we're going to lie to us. A lot of times I talk to people and, they need to lose 80 pounds, maybe plus, like well over 50. And they're thinking, man, if I just lose 20, 30 pounds, I think I'd be right where I need to be. Now, I think subconsciously what they're telling me is that if I could lose 20 or 30 pounds, I would feel so much better because I would see proof of concept, and that would give me more buy-in, and that would give me more confidence that I could do this. In other words, that person is looking for more extrinsic top-down motivation. Okay. So that's where it's my job to get in touch with that person and figure out what it is intrinsically that they have an opportunity to get in touch with that would enhance their chances of success. So with all that in mind, you got the white hot, you got the slow, steady motivation. One comes extrinsically, the other comes intrinsically. And again, this isn't cut in black and white, etched in stone. Like, I'm sure there's examples on both sides of the opposite, but for all intents and purposes and for generalization, this is a good template, good model to work off of. So none of this matters if you aren't in touch with your identity, if you aren't in touch with what you identify as. Now, do I identify as who I am currently and who I've been in the past? Or am I identifying with my future self, or a combination of? In other words, I am identifying as someone who is going to get to that future self. Okay. But whatever the case may be, if you identify as that, we'll just use, a term that isn't so friendly, but for effect again, like if you just identify as that fat person, or if you just identify as that person that's always in pain or can't move, or identify as weak. And even though you might have a goal to reverse that in your mind, if you always identify as that, guess what you're going to manifest? That's where the sabotage comes in. Now, how do you identify as something that you've never been? Right? That's a difficult thing for a lot of people, but there are visualization techniques you can utilize. There are affirmations, mantras, if that's your thing, that you can utilize. And there's a lot of things you can do with like the personal myths that we tell ourselves. And that is a personal myth. If I say I am weak, I am the fat person, I am the person that can't move, like that becomes a personal myth. And whenever we lock into any sort of personal myth, then we are ignoring all aspects of the truth within that. So if I am fat, then there's an opportunity and a possibility that I can be slim. If I am weak, then there's an opportunity and a possibility that I can be strong. If I have no energy, then there is an opportunity for me to have a lot of energy. If I'm currently in pain, there's an opportunity for me to be out of pain and feel good. Well, that's where it's got to start. You've got to play with possibilities. You've got to be open-minded. But sooner or later, you've got to be able to picture your future self when that story gap is closed. What's that look like? And be able to put yourself in that space daily. I recommend stacking that with something you already do, your visualizations. For me, it's like whether I pray, set intentions, whatever my thing is for that morning, I'm going to do my visualizations on my future, and then also on my past as well. But that's a good way for me personally to not live in the future or live in the past. I can give the past some time and attention. I can give the future some time and attention, and then commit to living in the present for the rest of the day. So for me, I find that works. But before you start getting into the identity thing, really source your motivation, your intrinsic motivation, that personality, values, purpose, needs, story gap, fulfillment, all that. Source what needs to happen for you to be successful. And I can promise, if you take the time to do this, the time's going to pass anyway. Either you're not going to be doing something about what you want to be doing something about, or you're going to be doing something about what you want to be doing something about, but you're not on a laser focused, succinct, and efficient plan to do it. Okay. So take the time instead of wasting time to figure out exactly what it's going to take for you to get to where you want to go, right? And why you want to get there. Because once you find the vision of what it is that you want to become or how you want to contribute to the world, and that totally matches all that stuff. It matches your personality, your values, your purpose. It meets your needs. It closes your story gap, and it leaves you feeling fulfilled. Now imagine that state, and then you listen to a motivational speaker, and then you listen to a motivational podcast or some motivational music. It's a completely different thing. Now imagine those two combined being healthy, and then you're forming an identity about your future self. It's way more believable. All right. Just going to check the comments real quick here. Kind of like a kid ever since comments have been enabled on this app. So exciting for me. So we got here Tracy. Hey, you're very welcome, Tracy. Always my pleasure. Tracy is awesome person from Canada, I believe. So yeah, that's about all I got for you guys. I appreciate you tuning in. Again, source your motivation. If you have a dream or a destiny that you want to tackle, and geez Louise, I'm just gonna show this one for a laugh. I don't know how they found me. Anyway, but anyway, where was I? Yeah. So take the time to source those motivations. If there's any dream, anything you want to accomplish that you haven't taken action on, like source that. Is there doubt going on? What is the doubt? And if it's like wondering if you can do it, like spoiler, yes, you can. I might be even talking to someone I've never met or talked to in my life, but I guarantee you can do it. You can do it so long as your goals are reasonable. But take the time to do that. If you need some help, obviously I'm always here for you. It's what I do. It's what I love. It is my mission in life. So my DM is always open for you. You can comment down below, or you can reach out to me. Reach out to me direct, Jerry@biohackingtruth.com, Coach Jerry at coachjerry.fit, 406-241-3763. Like I said, I'm always here for you. And on a related note, semi-related note, I've got this stress reduction mini course that I am giving away. So if you're interested in that, just put your name in the comments, and I will reach out to you on DM and get your email and get that shipped off to you as soon as possible. But again, this is a stress reduction course. It's meant to be a pocket guide. You can take it with you wherever you want, and you can bust it out. There's stuff in there is like stuff that you can do daily for long-term stress management. There's things you can do in the moment, like talking 1 to 3 minutes to get you de-stressed, more towards a state of centered and balanced. And I'm excited, and I think there's a big need for it. So if you're interested, just reach out to me. But if there's nothing else, no other comments, I appreciate you for tuning in. Peace, much love, and live well.